we are in an era right now where actually the live experience, like the live show market is a little bit oversaturated because there was this overcorrection post-COVID where everybody was trying to do live events. And Taylor Swift comes out and everybody, it felt like everybody was trying to get tickets. I'm in these like Web3 group chats, 150 people, very much adults, lots of men. And the conversation was like, are you getting your Taylor Swift tickets? I'm like, oh, like now a bunch of people know what trying to get into the other side mint was like. It was like this like nightmare. And in both cases, it was a total disaster in this way that is so confusing because you're like, you knew the numbers. Like it's like making a dinner reservation. It's like inviting 30 people to dinner and then making a dinner reservation for 15 people and being like, well, how could we have known? Like, what could have happened? The Ticketmaster's like, there was unprecedented demand for, I'm like, you sent out the invites. Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. It is time for your weekly recap where we go through all of the big stories happening in Web3 today. And joining me to do this is LG, founder of The First Mint, which is a Web3 sports community. LG, you and I have been talking, I feel like, on and off, mostly off, but for months trying to make something happen. So I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh yeah, I always stay in touch with the podcasters that do a much better job than I do. So that's
definitely
that's
not
what I do. But no, Carly, thank you for having me on. Love what you're doing at Overpriced JPEGs and the brand you built, and you've had such fantastic guests. So it's surreal to be on.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. We are going to talk about a lot of good stuff today. I mean, it feels like things are maybe simmering down a little bit from where they were last week at their feverish, frenzied pitch. But of course, we still got to cover what the latest is going on with SBF, FTX. I mean, he needs to... he is either protected by the government or he is not being advised by lawyers, but we'll get into it. We are going to talk about Wagmi-san and the 10KTF acquisition by Yuga Labs. I know you've got thoughts on that. Excited to hear what you think. The Taylor Swift Ticketmaster debacle, there are lessons here that the world needs to take away, and those lessons bring you to Web3. So we'll talk about lessons there. Some other good stuff to get into as well. But before we do, we need to hear a word from our lovely, lovely sponsors.
When it comes to NFTs, convenience often wins over security, despite scams being everywhere. Brands and artists have no other choice by complying with big marketplace terms and weak security because no good alternative exists. Which is what prompted Ledger to fix the problems of NFTs themselves and launch Ledger Market. The Ledger Market provides an end-to-end secure NFT experience for brands, artists, and users, enabling true ownership and control over NFT assets, from minting to storing. Ledger Market secures NFT projects via Ledger Enterprise, keeping you protected from phishing attacks and scams. And the market directs users to Ledger Live, where they can transact with a contract directly, giving clear signing details instead of blind signing and praying. Don't trust, verify with clear signing from Ledger Market. Stay up to date on the latest drops and marketplace updates by following Ledger on Twitter and joining the Ledger Open Discord, which is linked in the show notes below. BUENO is the NFT toolkit you need to launch your digital collectible on the blockchain without coding. Every step of the NFT creation process, from generation to mint, all taken care of by the BUENO NFT toolkit. With BUENO, you can load up your art layers, reorder the layers, tinker with rarity, everything you need to make your NFT project a reality. BUENO even allows you to mint your tokens on the blockchain with zero code and offers advanced minting logic like linking allow lists, airdropping tokens, and on-chain royalty configuration. As a part of their launchpad, you'll get access to forums to run surveys, email collection, and build your pre-sale list to make sure you are hooked into your own community. BUENO is full of powerful tools you need to build the most expressive NFT project possible. So go to bueno.art and start building your own collections today.
I always start a little broad here at the top of the show, LG. Just how you feeling market-wise, sentiment-wise? What do you feel like the vibe is at the moment?
You know what? I maybe have like a contrarian opinion on this.
We love those.
Like I don't think the FTX thing, in terms of the broader public sentiment, like people who aren't in crypto, who think about crypto, I don't think this has actually changed their opinion. I think those people have always thought that crypto is some huge scam. And they're like, yes, of course, another normal thing, another normal day for crypto. Of course, a huge exchange went down. Like, I think that, and I think at the end of the day, most people are actually kind of enjoying the drama. Like, we all love just nasty, crazy stories, and crypto's always had those, right? So I think that this is just another chapter. I think the broader market, like, I don't think this changes I don't think this changes very many people's like interest in crypto if they had some, or disinterest. And I'd say in the JPEG market, honestly, people lost like 95% of their value. Like 6 months ago, maybe people who held on the exchange are burned, sure, and maybe that's a few people, maybe quite a few, maybe just not many in my circles, but people are still showing up every day, right? And that's such a typical thing to say, but it's like, I haven't seen people really kind of change their opinion on the NFTs that they hold, right? Like, it hasn't really affected that resolve. So those are my thoughts. What do you think, Carly? How are you feeling?
I would say high level, at the highest level, I don't necessarily entirely disagree with you in the sense that I think the crypto market, the crypto Twitter has shown itself to be like highly resilient here. You're seeing some comments from OGs saying like the faith in crypto was down so much worse in the 2017, 2018 bear run, and most people are very much still here who survived the last round of collapses are very much still here being like, yeah, this hasn't really shaken my resolve. You see it in the price of ETH. I mean, we're at 1,200. That's not out of what the norm has been over the past X number of months. So it's incredibly striking that ETH hasn't taken some huge hit. It had certainly a dip. Yeah. It's dipped down from where it was earlier this this month, but it's nothing crazy. So from that standpoint, agreed. Where I would say I disagree with what you just said is I think legislators are impacted by this. So there's this, maybe the broader crypto public doesn't really shake their opinion if they already thought it was a scam. This only reinforces that if they don't think it's a scam, they don't really understand what happened with FTX, whatever the case might be. I do think the fact that he was such a prominent face to regulators and to people in Congress is real egg on the crypto community's face. And it's unclear what the ramifications of that may end up being. I'm sure that you have a lot of people in power who feel they have been embarrassed by Sam Bankman-Fried. And if that embarrassment is ire that is then pointed at the whole of the industry, that's the concern. So remains to be seen. But yeah, I mean, look, I keep joking about this, but you've got, apes, again, certainly off their highs, but hanging in at like 60 ETH. It's amazing to me how well projects have actually weathered this storm, understanding that there are still plenty of people who have been hurt, plenty of people who were hurt in the FTX situation. And
I've always said, Carly,
don't do anything crazy.
The most insane thing about NFTs is that there's a market for them. Like at the end of the day, like it's still, you zoom out, you're like, what are we doing? Right. And so even now, like in the darkest days where it's like, you're right, the legislators are coming, they're circling, a lot of powerful people feel burned. That's a great take. People are still buying apes. Like people are still like Jimmy ETH just goes out and he's like, all right, I just bought another 6 apes, no problem. Like it's just like people are still like, yeah, I'll spend some money. That at the end of the day, the fact that you can still sell any NFT at all right now is to me the most insane thing about the whole industry. And shows the resolve, So sure, volume's down, but it's like OpenSea is still doing what, like $5 million a day or something, or maybe less or more than that, but it's still doing a decent amount. Like that's people are still spending, right? So that's the end of the day. People are choosing with their wallets, and it hasn't completely dried up yet.
Absolutely. Let's talk now a little bit more in depth about SBF and the FTX situation. Obviously, we gave the overview last week. But the cards keep toppling. I mean, first, I think this came out after the episode last week. This hack that started to be in play. As far as I know, we're still unclear if this was an inside job, SBF, siphoning off funds for himself or for somebody else, or if this is something that hackers actually just got in and took, whatever liquid assets were left. I don't know. That was wild. I mean, the news that Michael Lewis has been following SBF for the last 6 months. Cannot wait for that movie. Speaking of which, actually, we had Michael Burry talking about market sentiment overall. Michael Burry tweeting, like, you have no idea how short I am, or you can't imagine how short I am, or something. Michael Burry, of course, being one of the main subjects in The Big Short, the Michael Lewis book that turned into the movie The Big Short. So there's probably more market pain to come, but we've left that section, but felt that was worth noting. Alameda,
Can I just comment on Michael Lewis, because I'm a huge fan, and I read Moneyball years ago before the shortly after it came out, being relatively pretty interested in sports. I'm a huge fan of his, and it's like when I saw that the other day that he was involved, I was like, of course he's there.
I know,
like that guy has such a nose for stuff. And he has a book about the pandemic. Where it's like he was literally writing a book about like the California health system and kind of like where the holes are, and like following this woman who's like the head of health who was like trying to figure out a tuberculosis outbreak. And then it's like, and then COVID happened and he was like kind of there, and it's just like this guy, like whatever he's working on, just freaking run the other way, like just run the other direction, whatever he's investigating at the time, like just get out of there, because he knows.
I joked about that too when people were sending me articles about the fact that Michael Lewis was there. I was like, what deal with the devil did this man make to get all of these stories? It's unbelievable. Totally agree. Speaking of journalism, I really do want to comment on this New York Times story that came out. We're a couple days past this now, but I think it's worth repeating just how soft this piece was. Did you read this, LG?
Yeah, I thought it was very strange. And that was kind of like, it's also that it's so blatantly soft that to me, it just reveals like, listen, we're in the age of like fake news and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like to not believe that some media sources have certain interests in certain directions is a little foolish. At the end of the day, like Jeff Bezos owns like Washington Post and stuff like that. So it's not gonna affect your basic local news maybe, but in terms of like bigger stories, I think there's always going to be influence there. You know that certain stories get killed or changed and stuff. So to me, I don't know what that is. Maybe this is what Michael Lewis is going to tell us in his book when it finally comes out, like what exactly happened there. But it's very odd. What did you obviously you thought so as well, Carly?
Yeah, I think it's so strange, and I don't know how to make heads or tails of it. I mean, I think the obvious take that truly may be correct is, SBF was a major donor to the Democratic Party. His parents are complete power brokers in Democratic circles, and there's a desire to, I don't know, soften what's been done here or paint him as a more tragic figure, or that would be the right-wing cynical take, though I don't actually think it's necessarily wrong. I think that very well could be what's going on. I mean, what's striking is, I've gone through my own rounds with the New York press corps. I didn't work on Andrew Yang's mayoral campaign, but I worked on his presidential campaign and very close to him and the team, and it was like Andrew Yang literally got far worse press for saying his favorite subway stop was Times Square because it was his home stop than Sam Bankman-Fried got for losing like $16 billion in client money. Like, and I'm only being lightly facetious there. I want to do a little exercise, which is, and we'll see if it translates. What's so insidious about bad media coverage is it's not like bad media coverage by outlets like the New York Times, who if you're looking at the New York Post or you're looking at like a Breitbart or something that's so, just kind of pathologically tabloidy in some ways, you can just pick out individual lines that are nuts. The New York Times is more insidious about the way they do it. It's an overall aura they paint. It's in subtleties. But I did pull some quotes, coverage from Yang's mayoral campaign, and then some coverage of Sam Bankman-Fried. And I want to see if this hits, if I can pull quotes out and it hits.
Carly,
the way
this is personal for you. I like it. This is,
I
could tell. I was going to ask you, because I was like, you know better than anybody here, like how this stuff works, but I like you're getting personal on it now. This is good.
So this is a like kind of an intro or so to an article about Yang, and then it includes a quote by Yang, and then I'll do kind of an intro-ish to this, or a piece in the Sam piece, and then a quote by Sam. So this is from the Yang article. In the last few months, the man who would be New York's most famous mayoral candidate acted like anything but one. He spent more time barnstorming Georgia than he did the 5 boroughs. He openly contemplated cabinet roles and lobbied Washington lawmakers around stimulus relief. And he often made television appearances from his weekend home in the Hudson Valley rather than from his apartment in Hell's Kitchen. Quote, this is the quote they include from Yang. If someone's looking for a candidate who has spent the last couple decades steeped in city government, I likely won't be their candidate, Mr. Yang said in a Friday morning interview from his weekend home in New Paltz, New York, about 80 miles outside Manhattan. And some context here is this was the thing, was all along, all the stories at the time, it was always this sense that that Yang is not a real New Yorker. He spends time elsewhere. They included his like in his statement, which of course reads kind of dumb. And
Yeah.
that's a very telling thing that you're going to include a like, which you clearly had, it was still editorially honest if you'd taken that like out. Now here's a section about Sam and the quote they include from Sam. In the Bahamas, Mr. Bankman-Fried led a sometimes cloistered existence, surrounded by a small coterie of colleagues, some of whom were in romantic relationships with other FTX employees, according to 4 people familiar with the matter. He and his top lieutenants lived together in a penthouse in Albany, a 600-acre oceanside resort on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas. Asked whether he was overly dependent on that small group, Mr. Bankman-Fried said his circle of close colleagues numbered about 15. Quote, realistically speaking, I don't think anyone can maintain close contact and close communication with more than 15 people, he said. The relationship between Alameda and FTX was the root of Mr. Bankman-Fried's downfall. So again, I don't know if this hits when you just read these 2 quotes separately, but Yang's crime was campaigning for Biden in Georgia before he'd run for mayor, but shortly before he announced he was running for mayor of New York. Bankman-Fried loses literally billions of dollars, topples an industry, huge damage to probably hundreds of thousands, certainly thousands of people. And they're just giving an opportunity to correct narratives that are out there about him. Like they're being like, do you not, is your circle too close? Could not enough people kind of course correct you? And he's like, well, who can keep in touch with more than 15 people? Which is actually reasonable. You're right. You don't have close contact for the most part with more than 15 people. They're letting him respond in these reasonable ways to the attacks on him. And then this last line, the relationship between Alameda and FTX was the root of Mr. Bankman-Fried's downfall. And they go on, but what are you talking about? He was stealing customer deposits to cover up his bad bets. It's really grasping.
They're removing accountability, right?
Totally.
And that's what they're doing and they're placing it on something that's ambiguous, like the relationship between FTX and Alameda. What does that mean? This is the same people. This is the same frickin' people in his little circle. He's sitting there while they're talking to each other.
The relationship he set up.
Yeah,
there's no agency in that sentence.
Yeah, he's FTX, right? But it's but I see what you mean, where they're just it's an abstraction. They're like, poor guy. He just hired the wrong people to make all these deals. The same people who are hanging out with him in Bahamas and they're having their orgies or whatever. It's how could he know that, they'd wake up the next morning and make all these phone calls, right? Where it's and I see what you mean. Yeah, it's still a completely different scenario because it's one thing, for a campaign, it's you're trying to, gain favor for, for the people, right? For voters. Whereas FTX, nobody's voting. It's just a general public perception.
Absolutely. The New York Times was trying to vet out mayoral candidates. I get it. And I think, there's maybe an argument that on this New York Times piece side about Sam Bankman-Fried, the Times wants, we're in the fog of war. We don't know exactly what's happened. They don't want to use really charged terms like theft and criminal
Scam.
and all these things when kind of everything hasn't come to light yet. But it's really telling.
It's a shame that they're approaching it that way. Why do you think, Carly? Why do you think they're doing it that way? Why are they trying to preserve his public image? Because there seems to be, and I saw something where it's he's trying to raise more cash. This to me is okay, well, he's gone now. We're not we're done with Sam. He go away. But why are they trying to rehabilitate him so quickly? Is he going to do something else? Bring him back in a couple of years? He's matured. He's older now. What's the deal?
Did you see there was a clip of Kevin O'Leary, who was a backer of FTX? He was asked if he would back Sam again, and if he came back in a few years and had another idea for a great crypto something or other, and Kevin said yes. He said yes, and his point, it's the same shit with Adam Newman, right? Kevin's point was FTX was a great product, right? It was a great trading product. Sam, clearly is smart and made his millions or whatever doing his Bitcoin trading and then built a really good trading product. Kevin was saying we used it, we like it. Now, maybe that's partly somebody who's uncomfortable acknowledging how wrong they were or something. But I think the logic for so many people with whether Adam Newman or Sam is it is really, really hard to build a product that millions of people use or that generates millions in revenue. It's something that Adam Newman did with WeWork. It is something that, Sam did with FTX. And so I think the thinking is this next time around, we'll put the proper guardrails around them. We'll figure out how to, not allow the fraud while extracting the genius. And I get it. And I don't think it's even fair to fully compare these two. I think Adam fell short of like out and out fraud in what he did. I think he was just a completely like corrupted, too powerful businessman. The other comparison here that I think is really interesting between WeWork and FTX is it seems like you had a similar dynamic in poor business calculus, where you have on the WeWork side, you have a company that's getting into all these long-term rental agreements with buildings that they're on the hook for 10 years or 5 years or whatever these lease agreements they were signing were, countered by short-term revenue of customers that could cancel at any time. And that mismatch in what you owed and what was coming in proved to be, a huge, just fundamental problem in their business.
Enormous.
And similarly with FTX, one of the problems was you had Caroline Ellison, is that her name? The woman who's running Alameda, but Sam, whatever, these guys making these incredibly illiquid venture investments that are going to take years to play out. While on the other hand, they've got these loans that can be called at any time. And you've got people who can ask for their money back at any time. So again, you have this duration mismatch with both businesses that I think is really striking.
Isn't that what banks do?
But they're FDIC insured.
I know, absolutely. But I'm saying is like, isn't that the whole problem with centralized exchanges, that they're kind of operating like banks, but in a much riskier way, right? With a far less established, kind of structure, but it's essentially kind of the same thing. Like everybody wanted their money back from the bank being in the same situation. It's like, they don't have that money available for you, but it's a far deeper institution. Anyways, I don't want to get back to like
exactly. They have the regulations. They have sort of like capital requirements that they have to hold. They're audited. It's all those things. I saw somebody in a group chat I was in made some joke that I thought was really funny. It was like, I will only be putting my money with like, I wish I could, it's like people want to like, live and raise their kids in Darien with a white picket fence and, like die there with, like just like making the joke of like, we all hated, or it's so easy to hate on sort of your traditional financiers and kind of like the finance bro. But I want you like your stable person who wants to maintain their reputation in the country club in some ways. Absolutely. More than I want whatever we're dealing with now. Let's talk about WAGMI Yugaverse. This acquisition. I know you're a 10KTF fan. So at the high level here, Yuga continues to consolidate players in the space. A really awesome. I mean, they make good acquisitions. What can you say? And they recently acquired 10KTF, which is the project, I guess, started by Beeple and Guy Osiri, power duo there. Guy, of course, has had long ties to Yuga, so it's not entirely surprising. Yeah. You own a bunch of 10KTF. What's your feeling?
I do. So I'll tell you the little story. Just over a year ago, some folks in the First Mint got me into it. Shout out to Quadzilla, who's one of our guys and a huge holder. And he was onto it from the start. He like messaged me late one night. He's like, LG, Beeple's part of it. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And it took me a while for him to explain. He's like, this 10KTF thing, Beeple's secretly part of it. And I was like, okay, that sounds exciting if Beeple's doing something else. So I kind of like aped in a little bit, but I still I didn't know what the hell was going on for like the longest time. And sometimes I still don't, because it is a project with quite a bit of depth. So I accumulated, I made some merch, because you basically like make like digital merch of your avatar, your PFP or whatever, with a few selections or a few projects kind of selected as the list for that. So like apes and cool cats and a few others. And yeah, I'm not surprised at all. This acquisition, like 10KTF is top class. Like if you just literally want to get a glimpse of how they're top class, like go to the Twitter, click on media and scroll through their storytelling videos. And that is like, you're like, that is what we want out of like storytelling NFTs. The big keyword from the last couple months is like, you want this level animation. You want like every week a new chapter comes out that then you as a collector have something to go participate in. So basically what they did through the summer is like, here's a new chapter of WAGMI-san. He has his shop in New Tokyo. His shop gets like burned down. His cat dies. He's fighting the mob. The mob's run by the toads, cryptodes, and then there's what do they call it? Godzilla, but the Japanese word. Anyways,
mechs, or is it?
No, not a mecha.
Aren't those like Japanese robot bad guys?
No, it's not a robot.
Yeah, I understand, but they are
Kaiju is the word for like a massive monster, basically. So the kaiju comes along to New Tokyo, and we all have to fight it. So basically, at each of these chapters, you go and submit your avatar. You load it with all the gear that you've made and minted or bought, and you enter the mission to try and like fight for the next chapter. And then they're like, okay, congrats everybody, we won together. We all beat the kaiju, or we all lost. So it was a very cool, like, very subtle but very high quality. That high quality was there, so you could tell the guy and people were heavily behind like the production crew. So it's kind of like watching this like little 2-minute movie every week that you followed for like 3 or 4 months. So I'm not surprised that this acquisition happened. I think Yuga knows what they're doing. Like they're going to buy up as much of the market as the market kind of tanks, because they're just going to buy the projects they think are going to survive and then come out of into the bowl being like, hey, like, this is our market now, baby.
What you're describing, right? 10KTF has done such a great job of using staking as a way to create greater engagement from the community by tying the reason you're staking with something that's happening in the story. And by dovetailing these two, you just end up with a really high quality project with high quality holders. And I was trying to look, Punk 9059 NFT statistics posted and showed that there was a spike, obviously, in 10KTF volume and activity right after the announcement came out, which he was showing that chart to highlight the fact that there weren't leaks, which is great. That's something that's plagued Yuga for a long time, is a lot of these announcements are preceded by sale volume spikes that seem to imply that like things had been leaked from Yuga. That didn't happen this time, which is great. But I had, before I'd even seen that, I'd gone on OpenSea to see if there were price spikes at 10KTF, and it didn't seem like there were, which is strange. I mean, you had volume spiking, but you didn't see the price really going up.
I think people have known that there's a connection for a really long time. Honestly, like there's been a lot of hints. They've been using ApeCoin in the Yuga ecosystem as rewards for quite a while now.
They got an ApeCoin airdrop. They were like the only project.
Yes, it was very nice. So there's been a lot of little subtle hints like that, and also you're like, listen, like the Guy Osiri part is like, okay, well, like there's no part where he's like, oh, I'm sorry, Gargamel, I can't tell you what's happening with 10KTF. You know what I mean? Like there's not. He's kind of making that happen. So. And especially with Beeple, it's like, who doesn't want to be aligned with Beeple, right? It's like you're talking about the biggest artist in the space and the person who kind of kicked it all off. So I think that connection has been there for a long time, Carly. So that's why there wasn't that much of a spike. Like I think people who thought that might happen, they aped in a long time ago, and they're holding. And especially now in the bear market, it's like you're only like those spikes for big acquisitions and big moves like that, Carly. Like I think you're only going to get that so much right now when people are being conservative.
Yeah, that makes sense. It'll be interesting to see. I guess the real test will be what happens from here. I know 10KTF was a little bit involved in they've been involved in other side in various capacities, or it's been teased they're going to be involved in other side. But will you have this sort of New Tokyo and Battletown and whatever kind of all these places that are involved in the 10KTF story? Will they now be built out within other side in various ways? I'm sure the answer is yes. And
Also been rumored for a long time, because there's still 100,000. The other half of other side is still unreleased, and they still haven't said how those are going to come out. So that's been rumored for a long time, that like there's certain Genesis pieces in 10KTF that you can hold, that it's like holders of that are each, a quad, going back to the same guys, said that people get a 1-for-1 land claim for that. I don't know if that's true. I think that's his own hopeful wish. But there's definitely going to be something involved there for sure. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great way to release the other 100,000 lands, is for them to be involved with other projects, either in the Yuga ecosystem, like Punks and Meebits, or just other stuff they buy, or just other big projects to partner with.
Speaking of, I guess, digital wearables is the connect I'm going to make here, because you've got 10KTF obviously deals heavily in wearables. The dotSwoosh unveiling or announcement, I should say, pretty exciting. Nike has announced that they are launching dotSwoosh, which is like a Web3 platform and ecosystem. You'll be able to go on, shop for exclusive digital wearables, some of which will have physical tie-ins, and it's really going to be Nike's hub for their digital goods. What do you think about this?
So we just covered this on the show a little while ago, where you covered specifically the Artifact acquisition from last year. and what that meant for what Nike's going to do. And I'm very excited for it. I'm not surprised. They didn't just buy Artifact as like a brand. They also bought it to integrate the technology and honestly integrate the thinking. Like they also hired those guys. So Benoit Pagatot is now like their chief, like whatever metaverse person or metaverse brand guy. So this is a project I would say is very much led by him. Who he was one of the founders of Artifact, the CEO. I think it's exciting. I think like that whatever Nike does, like it's one of those brand leaders in the industry. You know, I worked in agencies for a long time where it's like when the biggest fish jumps, they all figure out how to jump. They try and jump just as high. So it's like, you know, you've got Nike launching this, you got Starbucks doing their rewards app soon. It's like that, all the other brands after that, all the little fish after that are then going to try later next year to do very similar things. To give you a bit of background, because I did a lot of research on Nike and what they're doing. So they hired a new CEO 4 years ago, who was a guy who came from like cloud computing and security. So not a sports guy. He said when they hired him, they were like, what's your favorite piece of like Nike stuff? He's like, the golf shirts. Like he didn't even say the sneakers or anything like that. Everyone's like, who's this guy? You know? But basically they hired him as part of their like, I think it's called like their digital transformation or something like that, which is like a years long strategy where their plan is to basically like double, triple, quadruple revenue in e-commerce, in digital acquisition. Their goal for 2022 was to have what they call 30% digital penetration of like people buying things digitally. Like, so literally buying on your phone, buying at home, going to see in the store, going home and buying after, like doing that. They've already hit 50% specifically for sneakers this year. So they've already hit like this mass effect of like people are buying things digitally. They're very used to shopping online for sneakers and all that. And they will continue down that path. Their plan is to quite literally double their revenue of their sneaker business every year in digital. And that's like a $25 billion chunk of their what they do. Like, you know, like 75% of the money that Nike makes every year is sneakers. And they want to double that using like RFID and a digital version of your sneaker and everything that you're going to be able to do in either crypto or just digital ID. So that to me is like that's the start of that plan, is being like, all right, let's let people make sneakers, and sell digital goods, and then eventually every pair of shoes you buy will come with like a digital twin NFT, I'm sure, or something like that. And eventually what they want to do, another part, just to kind of give you the full story there, is a big part of doubling their revenue is trying to collect more revenue from secondary sales. Because right now, that's one of the hottest things you could have bought for the last 10 years is go online and buy whatever, the limited Yeezys or whatever, like go and buy the hottest shoe and then flip it for like 5X. And that's something that's like Nike wants a piece of that, man. They want a piece of those royalties of people making buckets off their shoes. So this is definitely the start of that.
That doubling revenue stat, they're trying to double their overall sneaker revenue or just double the digital category. And so they're trying to double their overall sales that they make in sneakers by digital, by basically saying we're going to have people then spending so much on digital that it contributes significantly to our capacity to double this. How many year after year is the intent to double? I mean, that's insane for such an entrenched business. They're not like some high growth startup. They're Nike.
But that's it, Carly. And that's kind of where I see that there's a lot of potential where it's like, okay, like you're talking about like the biggest footwear brand, arguably the biggest apparel brand ever. And they've never monetized anything digitally like that. So it's like, what can they actually do? Like how much people collect Nike sneakers and people collect NFTs like crazy. Can that be a match? Right. And Artifact was basically like, they started that with the idea of being acquired by Nike. They wanted to be acquired by Nike. What those guys started doing is they would take actual shoes, like actual Air Jordans or whatever, and modify them either in real life or digitally to be like, oh, it's a cool like Iron Man shoe and it floats, and they did all this crazy shit, but purposely to get Nike's attention and develop this whole like digital ecosystem in NFTs. So they, Nike, that was a really obvious acquisition for them, but to be like, it was like basically like a proof case that it's like, people are going to want this. People are going to want digital sneakers and avatars that are tied to them of Clone X and all that. So basically like they didn't even have to go do the work. Artifact went and did the work for them and be like, hey, there's a market for this. So they're like, great, we'll just buy you. And then we'll just bring your technology in and we'll slowly pick away at doubling that revenue, selling digital sneakers, which this swoosh store is like, that's the start of it. Like, do people actually just want to buy digitally exclusive gear from Nike? And we'll find out. We'll find out in January.
You know, it's funny. I've been saying now, I've said a couple times on this show that I think the language that brands are using as they enter this space or, you know, delve further into it is the litmus test for how serious they actually are about it.
Yeah.
With my point there being the brands that are not using the term NFT consistently feel like the more serious ones. Reddit, Instagram, Starbucks, and I know Nike is using the term virtual creations for what they're doing. They're not using the term NFT. And then I've been contrasting that with like the Lord of the Rings drop, which, you know, there was all this kind of lip service given to, oh, that this is for the Lord of the Ring fan. It's not just for your NFT person, but they called it a Web3 movie experience and they called it an NFT and all these things that are, to me, clearly going to turn off the kind of mainstream fan of Lord of the Rings who, you know, Star Trek, that fan base hates NFTs, right? So this is just another proof point in that test of like, if you're really serious about this, you drop that term. Now, I think the term NFT, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, like will persist for a long time, maybe forever as like industry speak in terms of like on the back end, if you're at the company, you know, we kind of need this catch-all term and digital collectible doesn't fit for everything. You know, digital ticket maybe, but what you're seeing, the way it seems to be playing out is that brands will come up with their own bespoke term depending on exactly what their activation looks like. And then NFT may stay this kind of catch-all, but it's not what you use in the marketing language. And I think that's really striking.
I worked with brands my entire career. So, you know, kind of have run through this many times in terms of what they want to call stuff. And we went through it in social media as well. Like, what are we doing? Are we Facebooking? Like, what is this? Right. And that's literally a question I had to deal with in like 2009. Right. And what I will say is that you can't go backwards when it comes to technology and branding. You can't say like, hey guys, it's not NFTs anymore. It's digital exclusive collectibles. It's like, no. You can only go forward. So we have to come up with something that's easier or better or sexier than NFT that then people it comes off their, you know, comes right out of their mouth so much easier. Like that, you have to kind of jump forward. And I think some of these brands trying to kind of create their own bespoke terms, eventually one of them will land it and that's what everybody will use, right? So it's like something like, I'll give you an example. I forgot what the term is, but it's like, you know, like Kleenex. Kleenex is a good example. It's a tissue, but every type of tissue, you call it a Kleenex, right? So it's like something like that is like a good example of like somebody will land on whatever that term is, and maybe that's what everybody will use. The
difference, it feels like to me, is that Kleenex is just one product. You know what I mean? It's just a thing you blow your nose into. NFTs are, you know, one's a ticket, one's just a collectible, one's a, like, there's so many different use cases. So I think you see people kind of naming or claiming whatever they're specifically doing, but that broad category term, it'll be interesting to see if it changes from NFT.
I think over time, the long term, Carly, is that you won't even say what it is. Like right now, like maybe if you're talking about something you saw on the internet, you don't necessarily, we're almost away from saying that you saw it online. Like you literally, like even a few times in this conversation, you're like, oh, I was reading this thing. It's like, Carly, where were you reading that? You didn't have a stack of newspapers like you're the freaking king of England at your, you know, sitting at your table every morning reading them. It's like, no, you saw that online. Everything you see is online, right? So it's, you know, we debated that for a long time. It was like, I'm on the internet, I'm surfing the internet, World Wide Web. And now we're just like, I saw it online. It was just online. And I think eventually it's like, I've got this online ticket or something. It's just like, it'll just, you won't even think
online.
about it.
It's like, I have a ticket and it's implied.
That's it. Yeah.
Speaking of tickets, the Taylor Swift Ticketmaster saga. First, let's just start with like, she is in a category all her own. We are in an era right now where actually the live experience, you know, like the live show market is a little bit oversaturated because there was this overcorrection post-COVID where everybody was trying to do live events. And so I know it's been hard actually for a lot of folks or artists, even, you know, fairly big names to sell out or more to make money on their experiences because inflation and this and that. And Taylor Swift comes out and everybody, like it felt like everybody was trying to get tickets. Obviously in my circle, I've got, you know, friends who are very much of the Taylor Swift fangirl age, but like even I was in group chats with like, I'm in these like Web3 group chats, 150 people, very much adults, you know, lots of men. And the conversation was like, are you getting your Taylor Swift tickets? Like it wasn't, it's amazing to me.
Taylor has never hesitated to, you know, cause a ruckus like with Spotify like 5-6 years ago, you know, so I'm not
she's not trying to do this on the Ticketmaster front.
No. I'm just saying it's just like, I mean that is in the way that she is a megastar, you know, and that this kind of stuff, it's like platforms pushing and changing how they do things will follow her because like you said, she has a gravitas that is beyond a
megastar in a category all her own. It's unbelievable. Like, you know, a megastar among the megastars, it feels like, honestly. I mean, she sold 1.2 million units of records for Midnight's, her most recent album. Yeah. Which was the first time that more than 1 million units of a record or whatever, physical had been sold since 2016 when she did it with Reputation. Like, it's not even like other artists, Ariana Grande had, broke some records with Sweetener and some of the albums she came out with after Reputation, but she wasn't selling like, albums like that. I mean, it's crazy. Let's make this Web3 now, which is... Well, let me say this. I was thinking, as we speak of Yuga Labs, I'm like, oh, like now a bunch of people know what trying to get into the other side mint was like. It was like this like nightmare. And the funny thing to me about both where Ticketmaster went wrong, because you had to register for a list, and then once you register for the list, maybe you got selected to get a text that told you when you could go online to try and buy tickets at a specific city, and you had to wait in line for hours and hours. And also like with the other side mint. With the other side, they KYC'd, right? So you actually there were verified ETH addresses to even get into the other side mint. And in both cases, it was a total disaster in this way that is so confusing, because you're like, you knew the numbers. Like, it's like making a dinner reservation. It's like inviting 30 people to dinner and then making a dinner reservation for 15 people and being like, well, how could we have known? Like, what could have happened? The Ticketmaster's like, there was unprecedented demand for, I'm like, you sent out the invites for the people who came. Like, the numbers, and I guess just more people showed up than they expected, but like, you didn't build a system that could anticipate the highest end of like everybody shows up for Taylor Swift. It's just hilarious. And Yuga Labs has clearly executed very well in many ways, but I felt like there was a similarity there.
Listen, if the ticket drop for T Swift went smoothly, we would not be talking about it. And I've been working with brands for 15 years, and I've seen them do all these social media snafus and all these issues. And I'm like,
engineering.
Sometimes I'm like,
attention.
I was like, this is a way to get in there somehow, or it's engineered by somebody else to kind of purposely mess it up. Right. So, or something, there's something going on there that you're right. Like, come on, man, it's Taylor Swift. Tell me you didn't know people were trying to buy that. Like, there's no way, but damn, we're talking about it, right? And that matters. So, or it could be Ticketmaster could be using it as leverage to do something else. Be like, hey, we need more funding, or I don't know if they don't get government funding, but something like that, right? It could be an internal thing where they want to change their system. Someone's trying to get leverage over the board or something like that. Who knows what's going on there, right?
It's interesting for me because I've always thought tickets were obviously such an interesting and obvious use case for NFTs, and they are. And I feel like that started as a royalty thing, when I first was getting into this industry or this space, I was like, oh, like the royalty piece is such a no-brainer. You've got a ticket that's about to sell, or I saw somebody tweeting today there are tickets on sales for Taylor for $34,000 right now being sold on secondary. Obviously, Taylor should get a cut of that. And we've obviously seen with the royalty debate that has ensued, it's a little bit more complicated, but we'll totally get there, right? We'll get there. The ticket, you'll have secondary sales on these tickets. They'll be able to be sold in some fixed number of marketplaces, or there'll be a few marketplaces that are blacklisted, whatever the case may be, right? I think we'll solve that. But that's what like hooks you, I feel like, into this industry. And what I found so striking about this was where I actually landed now that I'm a year into this was like, no, the real talking point here is about self-sovereignty and about the fact that these verified fan programs can't pull in the data from YouTube to see that you've watched every concert video of hers up there, and can't pull in from Shopify to show all the fan merch you bought, or you can't pull in from Twitter, or, these APIs. And we'll see if we get there, but what we need to is all of that data about me and what I do and how I interact with the internet should live with me in a digital asset container that I can then share as I see fit with something like a Ticketmaster, so that I can be, it shows that I'm a top fan. It should pull in that I was in the 0.5% of Taylor listeners last year in my Spotify Wrapped, whatever it is. And that data all exists, but it lives in these black boxes of the internet where they're siloed away, and it should live with me. And maybe it can live with both, right? These companies aren't going to give this up easily, right? This is their moat, but
that's where digital ID comes in, right? And we say digital ID, people are like, oh no, it's 1984, I'm going to be tracked. And it's like, well, yeah, sure. But it's like, if you want access to the world's greatest loyalty program, which is what Web3 is going to deliver us inevitably. And again, I think it's something Starbucks is going to start us off with, and Nike as well. It's like, we're going to need digital ID where people can retain a level of anonymity, but also be tracked and rewarded for their purchases and their fandom or whatever that is for their digital activities, right? So that's
We're
what you're
being
describing.
tracked now. We just don't get to keep the tracking data.
No, there's no benefit. Yeah, there's no benefit.
Worst case scenario.
Exactly.
We're being tracked, and it's just being controlled by
Absolutely.
these exogenous, businesses.
That's what Zuckerberg should have done, man. Forget dumping all this money into your shitty looking metaverse. Excuse me. It's just like your terrible looking freaking Nintendo Wii garbage. You should have just you already had everybody's digital ID. Just convert it and then sell it. Sell that as a service to every single brand and just integrate Web3 into it. Just be like, here's your digital ID. Here's this person's entire friggin' history. Everything you need to know about them. If they consent, then yes, they can use that to log into the Nike store and log into the Taylor Swift store and start buying stuff and be rewarded. Like even Facebook will track how much people have listened to friggin' Taylor Swift and all that, right? You could probably already tell how long ago they liked your page and a bunch of data, right? So that, in my opinion, that's what Facebook should have done. That's what any social network should do, is just convert all that user data into digital ID and jump right into crypto.
We are in an era of recentering the individual in their own commerce experiences, whatever, and this is across the board. And even just like recentering artists and fans in their relationship. I've been talking to some folks who are sort of at that cross section of Web3 and music that are working on this, and I think that's where I really hope, and the optimist in me believes we land, is like, because the funny thing is the artists don't have this data either. Ticketmaster has this, Taylor doesn't have it. And, we've seen this decline of artist fan pages, which used to be sort of the hub of fan life. And now it's moved to social media where again, the artist doesn't really control that. And I think NFTs are going to be an efficient way, the most efficient way, because some of this is possible without NFTs, to really recenter that fan creative relationship within the clutches of the fan of the creator, which is where they should be. So
COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses that need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage its treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the highly secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasury management to expressive, flexible, and multi-chain treasury features, such as global user management, global contacts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Masari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. You have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless. We're all bullish on NFTs, but gaining exposure to NFTs as a whole is difficult. How are you supposed to gain broad, generic exposure to an industry that's designed to be unique and non-fungible? CRYPTEX has the answer. CRYPTEX Finance produces synthetic tokens that lets you get exposure to areas of crypto that you otherwise couldn't. Their first product, TCAP, provides broad exposure to the total crypto market cap of all crypto assets. And their second product, JPEGZ, gives you the ability to get exposure to the entire NFT market. It's the first real NFT index token, so you don't have to go hunting for rares or finding under the radar opportunities. You just need to own some JPEGs, because JPEGZ tracks all NFT collections with real-time exposure. This is a first-of-a-kind product from CRYPTEX, who has worked in close collaboration with Chainlink for months to ensure accurate price feeds for true exposure. Live minting and trading of JPEGs will open at the end of Q4, so make sure you stay up to date with CRYPTEX Finance by joining their Discord, Telegram, or following them on Twitter.
a quick speed round of news, and then we'll close here. I want to talk about the first mint and what you guys have going on and everything and what you're up to. And I want you to give me the rundown on the autographs situation. Seems like there's some autograph scandals happening and Tom Brady's involved, which he's just like the supervillain of the month. I feel like Tom Brady. Fall from grace. Not really, of course, but obviously lots of people shitting on Tom Brady right now. The quick run through of some other news items to hit. Blur has announced a move to enforce royalties. They seem to be following the OpenSea model after previously on Blur, royalties were optional, but you were incentivized to pay royalties. They would give you more tokens if you actually paid them. They now will enforce royalties on collections that enable listings on Blur and block zero royalty marketplaces. So again, very similar to what OpenSea had suggested. All that crap OpenSea got, and I actually think they will end up, in hindsight, be looking like really positive leaders in the space. Also, some lawsuits to mention here. Epic versus Apple. The appeal is actually finally happening now. Epic has been suing Apple for a long time over what they deem, really predatory monopolistic practices, that 30% fee that they charge for in-app purchases. And I think what had happened with the Epic situation, they were trying to, drive people outside of the App Store and say, okay, you can go buy Epic in-game assets on a web browser, and they were kicked off the App Store for even doing that. So Epic lost the first lawsuit with Apple, but the appeal is kicking off, and it'll be interesting to see where that lands. I'm certainly on Team Epic on this, in spirit. I don't know, like letter of the law, but you live in Web3 and you just can't, it does hit you as so predatory that a company like Apple can charge 30% on all in-app purchases, not just like buying an app. It's like once you're in the app, it's they have all this power. The other lawsuit is Yuga Ryder rips. There was a new announcement there. There was supposed to be a hearing on November 7th. It looks like a judge has basically ruled that when it comes to whether or not Yuga's lawsuit should be thrown out, there doesn't need to be a jury trial. There doesn't need a whole trial, that a judge can basically look at this information and make a determination themselves. I think, please correct me, folks, if you think I'm wrong. I wanted to flag, because I've been tracking this lawsuit. I wanted to flag that there was sort of an update, but I hadn't dug deep enough to know all of the details on there. So it looks like a judge will be making a determination about this Yuga Ryder situation, or I guess specifically on whether or not Yuga's suit will be thrown out in the coming weeks. Let's talk about the First Mint. What are you guys up to?
Hey.
Tell folks a little bit about it, and then explain this autograph Tom Brady situation to me.
So, quick background. The First Mint started almost 2 years ago, and we had started covering exclusively Top Shot as kind of a community resource podcast. And something, honestly, Carly, that I was like, maybe a couple of dudes I know in Top Shot will listen to this, because it was there's only a couple hundred people back then. Even in the broader NFT scope, felt like a small high school. And then a couple weeks later, things blew up. So we charted on iTunes in the basketball category. It was great. We had some basketball players, basketball executives come on, and we're able, honestly, it was very lucky to be at the right place, right time. We're able to kind of onboard all the sports bettors, all the fantasy people that came into crypto and learned what an NFT was. That was a lot of that, they listened to us for that. So that was a huge honor back in the first half and most of 2021. And since then, we've taken different spins of kind of zooming out and working with different partners to launch projects and launch their communities and build their Discords. But recently we've decided to double down back onto sports, where it's just listen, there's so many parallels between NFTs, Web3, and sports. It's 24/7, 365. There's always something going on. Even if your team sucks and has never won the championship, you still connect with people part of your tribe, right? It's New York, the Knicks, they're garbage, but still Knicks fans connect with each other is a really good example of what I see in NFTs as well, that it's listen, who cares about the market? People just enjoy that connection. And that to me is the secret sauce of getting into Web3 is people come because they can speculate and they can trade, and maybe they can easily get a Nike shoe or whatever. But the people that are here right now that are still here, it's they're staying because of the community. And that's a super cheesy thing to say, but that's what sports is all about, is kind of talking with your community about speculation. Is this guy injured or whatever's going on? Who's the greatest? All that. There's so many parallels. So we want to double down on that. We think that that's a fantastic entry point for people. And what that's meant is it's changed our flagship content, which is the podcast, which is, again, almost 2 years old now, several hundred episodes, where now we kind of tell deeper business crypto sports stories. So, for example, the first episode we did at the revamp was okay, Steph Curry, he has a huge deal with Under Armour. A lot of people think that deal is going to be worth more than Michael Jordan's deal with Nike, largely through selling digital sneakers in the future. So what does that look like? What else is Steph Curry invested in, like FTX? How did Michael Jordan build his brand? What business decisions were there? And then what is being set up right now in the crypto space for that to kind of make money and thrive? So that was kind of the first episode. And since then, we've done a few others. We'll be on episode 6 this Monday, but we spoke to the Chicago Bulls about their drop on Coinbase last year. They did kind of 23 different one of ones, and also looked at on top of that, we coupled with okay, how does Chicago Bulls make money, right? How does the NBA make money, and how does digital and Web3 kind of become part of that? We talked about Artifact, and then last week or 2 weeks ago, we looked at Autograph. for a bit more of a controversial episode, where I kind of caught wind that people in Autograph, which is Tom Brady's a co-founder, they raised $200 million during the bull market to launch this basically like digital collectible platform that would be like, it was kind of cool. It's like, okay, it's a Tiger Woods thing, but he signed it, and here's a video of him like signing it on the iPad, and there you go, it's on the NFT. But basically, what's happened with that platform is a lot of empty promises, things that were supposed to happen that didn't happen, and what some people consider shady dealings. Tom Brady's co-founder is his 24-year-old neighbor, Dylan Rosenblatt, who also has a very successful father. And basically, that's where people feel like maybe the leadership isn't quite adequate for leading this project that has assigned big names like Tiger Woods and Naomi Osaka and like huge sport names, the best of the best. A lot of people don't feel like the leadership has been quite adequate. So to do an episode, what we did is we talked with a bunch of community members. We just put a call out being like, hey, how, have you spent money on this? Come talk to me. And we talked to some of the top collectors, including the number one guy who've dropped like hundreds of thousands on these NFTs, and to give a pretty sober picture of where things are at. The crown jewel of that story, obviously, being that at one point, they were having an AMA with Tom Brady in the Discord, being like, Tom's going to be here. He's going to be chat with you. And then the community went and sniffed out that turns out he was at practice during that time. And phones are not allowed at practice when you play in the NFL. And pretty much like literally asked one of the reporters covering the practice, be like, hey, what time was Tom actually on the field? When did he not have his phone? And it was the exact same time as the AMA in Discord. So kind of proving that it's like, hey.
So showing that somebody was faking being Tom Brady on Discord.
Tom Brady wasn't actually there. Yeah, exactly. So, not a great look.
Wow. So some of the empty promises, I remember when Autograph launched, and I've checked in on it from time to time.
Yeah.
I feel like they weren't promising that much. So how much do you feel like was like Autograph came out and promised XYZ things and didn't deliver it? And how much of it is like customer expectations that's a little bit reading between the lines, or that should be done if you're a competent management? Where do you fall on that?
So I think a lot of the promises were like, exclusive access, which again is kind of ambiguous, because then it's going to be up to you what you consider to be exclusive access. But they had, for example, and again, this is coming from community members. One of the access things was like, okay, you go to like a golf event with Tom Brady, you get to hang out with him, but it's like one person out of the collector group who got to go spoke to him for like 30 seconds, and that's it. The others, there wasn't actually a time where like Tom's going to stand and talk with everybody. It's like that didn't. So it's little things like that haven't quite panned out. And then on top of that, the part I didn't mention is, like a lot of other sports collectible products, an enormous oversupply, where they were selling out drops. So they kept them going, and they kept cranking them out until now they're not selling out at all anymore. And that's not working well. They just dropped a new thing with Slam Magazine, which was supposed to come out literally 11 months ago. And they were like, when they dropped the original like token, you buy this, you get access or whatever. They're like, this will be out in a couple weeks. And it took an entire year to produce. So there's a lot of little things like that people are pretty unhappy with. And honestly, Carly, outside of the running of the project, that stuff is just compounded by falling prices. And, the question of will anybody ever want these, right? And you've got some people there like, that's what they're presenting, even though it's a Web3 product, it's very traditional. It's like, it's autographed things of the greatest athletes. Like that's something that's held value for almost 100 years, like a signed baseball by Babe Ruth. Oh, it's so valuable, right? So you have a lot of hardcores in here that in that community, they'd be like, hey, like no matter what happens, I got the signed Tiger Woods, and there's only 12 of them, and I got 2 of them, and that's going to be worth a lot one day. And a lot of people are wondering if that's ever going to happen, especially considering the way the space is going, but also the way the company's run.
Yeah, I don't think we'll learn this lesson, because this happens with every industry, but there is the like fetishization of the, 20 to 25 to 28-year-old, usually male founder, almost exclusively male founder, I think, right? And that's because you've had these crazy outlier success stories of your like, Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, who were able to found a company when they were 19 and maintain control of it, relatively well. Obviously, there's plenty of reasons people hate Mark Zuckerberg, but the man has run the company for over a decade.
Yeah.
And that just the vast majority of people cannot do that, and like the vast majority of 25-year-olds like are going to turn it, make the kind of mistakes, I guess. If you're Sam Bankman-Fried and you're smart enough to actually get that big, there's some sort of fatal downfall that comes with it. So, I just hear these stories after stories, and it's like, let's just like take a beat before we just give all of this money to 20-year-olds.
Yeah,
that's
and I try on the show not to focus only on negative stuff, right? So that was kind of our first, like, okay, we're blowing the lid here. And then this past week we did like, okay, like FIFA's launched these NFT projects. There's a huge oversupply on those. How does FIFA make money? Obviously, they're very corrupt. And we kind of spoke to a few people with pretty high expertise in the matter on like, okay, like how does FIFA make and spend money, and which part of that is still kind of ripe for corruption despite all the trouble they've gotten in the past. And how does merchandise like NFTs fit into that?
Yeah. I had Aaron McDonald on the podcast recently, who CEO, founder of Altered State Machine. Yeah. And I think this is public. They have their FIFA partnership. It is public. Yeah, for sure it is.
I mean, it would be announced by now.
Yeah, they are. It is. It was in an article, I think I saw too. But they're doing some FIFA stuff. They're doing AI NFTs. So the concept there, is you have this like AI brain that you can buy and own and train up, and then you can put it in the brain of a FIFA soccer player,
right.
And you've basically coached up a team. I don't know if that's exactly what they're doing with FIFA. I think it is, but interesting stuff.
That's super
cool. Fun. LG, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll have you back to do some more deep dives on some of the next time there's a big sports scandal we need to talk about. And
love it.
Enjoy the weekend.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carly.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.